Good morning. I'm Andrew Lansley, Strategic Counsel with Lowe Associates, who are proud and privileged to be working with our colleagues in supporting the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. And it is, I'm looking much forward to the discussion today about the single market. As you can see, our cluster talk today is about making companies choose Europe, or indeed encouraging companies to choose Europe, and how we drive competitiveness with the single market strategy. I'm looking forward to a presentation from Carsten Schierenbeck from DG Grow, and a panel debate bringing together representatives from clusters across Europe to talk about some of the implications of the single market strategy and the opportunities that it offers. We're also looking forward to hearing from you, our participants today, not only in terms of responding to specific questions on Slido. I'm going to be asking you to tell us about the relevance of the SME strategy to you and some of the challenges that it may present, or the remaining progress that we need to make on the single market. Do please use the Q&A function to ask questions, and I will hope to bring those questions into our panel discussion. Also, please feel free to use the chat function, both for putting forward questions, but also for sharing comments and sharing links. And I know our panelists and presenters will keep an eye on the chat function as well, in terms of looking to see what points are being made by you, our participants. If you wish to speak, do raise a hand, although it may be simpler to write a question or a comment into the chat. We are, of course, being recorded, so please be aware of that. On the clusters talks, we always have opportunities both to have news from the Cluster Collaboration Platform and of the events that are taking place. And later on, before the end, we will have a further opportunity with Nina to hear about the funding opportunities that are available. So let me first, before we move into the discussion proper on the single market, the value of the single market, I hope, is evident to everyone. The potential of the single market in Europe for making Europe competitive globally is both vitally important, incredibly timely that we should be considering these matters, and of great importance to the people who you represent in your clusters. Let's hear about news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform first. From Nina, please.
Many thanks, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. Just a quick run through some news from the EC and also from the ECCP, especially regarding upcoming opportunities for you. So first of all, you might have seen it already, on the 26th of June, the Commission adopted a clean industrial state aid framework that will be a key instrument designed to fast-track the EU's green industrial transition, which I believe will be an important point as well for the single markets. The framework will support large-scale projects in areas such as renewable hydrogen production, carbon capture and storage, and manufacturing of net zero technologies. So if you want to read more about this framework, my colleague will put the link in the chat so that you can have a look at it. The Commission also seeks experts for the AI scientific panel. Here, the panel should be made up out of 60 independent experts to advise on the implementation of the AI Act. So if you, your colleagues, or anyone from your network is an expert in this field and has a PhD or an equivalent expertise in fields like AI risks, cybersecurity, or compute thresholds, and you can apply until the 14th of September to form part of this scientific panel. There are 2 surveys open from the ECCP. One is regarding investments. So for the preparation of a summary report from the ECCP team, we're collecting information on major investments that were attracted by European clusters, and to showcase the impact of the cluster organizations in fostering investment activities for regional development. So if you have any examples, please provide us with your feedback. It was a relatively short survey, via the tool EU survey. So if you click on the chat, you will be able to get to the survey. Please do so and let us know about the investments that you have. And the other survey is about the discussion groups. There are several discussion groups open from the ECCP on the platform LinkedIn, where there are discussions on networking, knowledge sharing, and so on. The survey is open until the 16th of July, and this is to enhance the services from the ECCP. So if you have a second, please also give us feedback on this. And regarding upcoming events, there are matchmakings happening in the second half of the year. First one in Taiwan on the 21st until the 23rd of October, where we can fund up to 20 cluster representatives to take part in going to Taiwan, visiting the Titronics and AIoT Taiwan expos. And it's also open for SMEs to come along at their own expenses. The first cutoff date is the 11th of July. So if you want to take part in this matchmaking, please send in your applications now. And the same also goes for the next matchmaking, which will take place in Vietnam on the 4th until the 6th of November. Here we'll be visiting the Vietnam Industrial Manufacturing Fair. So of course the matchmaking will be related to, as you see here, machinery, robotics and automation, logistics, digital, and also electronics and clean tech. Same, we can fund up to 20 cluster representatives to go, and the cutoff date is the 11th of July. And there are also other events happening. For example, our Clusters Meet Regions events. One is happening right now in Cluj in Romania. And we will also go to Slovenia, to Finland, and to Germany to discuss how clusters can support the regional development and policies for the twin transition. That's it from my side, and I hand over back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you very much. That's a very impressive series of global events, not just European events, coming up in the latter part of this year. And I do hope that you get substantial responses from the clusters to the survey on investment. Really useful to know, to have detail of how the clusters are promoting investment across Europe and inward investment in particular. So let us turn now to the discussion about the competitiveness of Europe as achieved through the single market strategy. We're delighted this morning to have a presentation from Carsten Schierenbeck, who is at DG Grow. Carsten, please take us through what the single market strategy and the further measures to promote the competitiveness in Europe are looking like.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. And maybe just as we're at announcements, maybe I can add also for some who might be interested, next week, for instance, the Commission will also put on the table a chemicals package with an action plan for the chemicals industry, which is, I think, also relevant because the Clean Industrial Deal state aid framework was mentioned, but part of the implementation of the Clean Industrial Deal is also sectoral implementation. We already had the Steels and Metal Action Plan and the Automotive Action Plan, and the chemicals will come next week. So maybe the cluster organization are also interested in this. So I thought I flag this. When we come to the single market strategy, I mean, this has been highlighted as a key horizontal area as part of the competitiveness compass, which is the Commission's kind of compass for this mandate of the European Commission. And we've presented the strategy in May. And it is, in a way, quite a frank presentation of, the different problems that we still have. It's quite a good account of, what is not yet working. We have been working with member states for a long time, particularly through the single market task force, SMEs. But there remains a lot to do. And probably many of you may have seen the Draghi report and the Letter report in particular that focus on, the single market, flagging that it can be much more than a market, but we need to fully unlock the potential. Next slide. I mean, this is also a response to the leaders and the European Council that ask for action there. And in parallel to the single market strategy, we have also published a simplification proposal with also a recommendation on small mid-caps, which are those companies that have 250 until 749 employees. But I believe you covered in a previous seminar simplification already, so I will not go so much in detail on it. But it's important to flag that we will also follow up on the action that I'm presenting here through our annual single market and competitiveness report. So that is always coming out at the beginning of the year, and where we highlight a little bit where we are on the different dimensions. And that provided already earlier this year sort of an update a bit to the Draghi account that provided quite a strong picture already of, I think, where our competitiveness challenges are. And in the annual single market and competitiveness report, you find a bit more details. But that report next year will then also give account on the implementation. Next slide, please. What this single market strategy is, in a kind of a way, a new approach. And it flags, first of all, that our single market, is our home market, which is our driver of competitiveness. It has, you see in the figures there, it has created 3.6 million jobs, at least contributed to 4% of GDP, but it can do so much more. And there we need to really address the remaining obstacles that there are. And what is there really interesting is that this strategy focus really on particular 10 cases that are not where we have the biggest problems. And I think this focus is really useful, because we need all actors with this on board. And we call it the terrible 10, but I will talk about this a little bit more. But the argument also to have a strong single market is also very important, because it also is our anchor for stability and resilience and gives us a stronger voice, of course, vis-a-vis other markets abroad, and in times of uncertainty on where tariffs are changing by the hour. I think this is very important that we focus at least on where we can make the life of businesses easier and faster in our own home market and contribute there. Next slide, please. So the new approach has sort of 9 key pillars. Maybe some remember there was a report, I think it was 2010, a long time ago, where actually sort of the key problems in the single market were flagged. And this focus now also on the terrible 10 barriers, I think this has a real potential to get also the focus on member states to double down on where we need more efforts, because there has been a lot of discussions. People are arguing for enforcement, but all this doesn't work as much as if member states really take actions to remove the barriers. And I'll give some examples in a minute. And the second key focus area is particularly to give dynamism to boosting the single market for services. And I think there's a lot of potential, but it has also been so far very difficult to address properly. But this is basically where we can get a lot of dynamism from. There's a lot more focus on SMEs, also together with startup and scale-up communication, on the small mid-caps, on more digitalisation, in particular removing still remaining paper-based requirements that links also to the push for more simplification and cutting red tape, but also to have smarter ways of how we do our enforcement. But key, I think, for me is the more ownership. This means having the member states really on board as partners. And for this, hopefully the zoom on the terrible 10 will help. And also for you as stakeholders to highlight in your member states, where are we, to bring this into the discussions could perhaps help. And there's also synergy with a budget, MFF, so that we also see that there should be a link to addressing the barriers, and implementing reforms should also be linked to basically using our EU budget. And there needs to be also a protection. This concerns particular our customs, the e-commerce. I think in the COVID pandemic, everybody has realized how many products we get where we're not always sure whether they conform. So we need more attention to also their creating also a level playing field vis-a-vis companies abroad that send products to our market. Next slide, please. So this is sort of a bit the overview of the terrible trends, and actually the communication of the single market strategy is actually very detailed in terms of highlighting particular where we still have problems. And here you have, of course, quite often overly complex EU rules. You have a lack of ownership from member states that need to be addressed. And there are particular issues with regards to fragmenting packaging and labeling and waste rules. And I will give some examples a little bit more. But we also need to tackle standard settings, territorial supply constraints that sometimes restrict then, for instance, supermarkets that are not able then to sell products that are cheaper in one member state than into another. And of course, that relate to higher costs, etc. Restrictive rules, which means that companies have to deal with member states specific rules. Sometimes we have gold plating, sort of where member states add additional requirements on top of what the EU has asked for in the implementation of directives. And a particular burdensome is the posting of workers and the recognition of professional qualification. But I can give some examples. Let's go to the next slide. So one example, for instance, is the fragmentation of well, we see this on the next one later to come. That's a horizontal one. Well, I think here the focus is a little bit that particular in cooperation with the member states, particularly through the single market task force SMEs, we can address these 10 fields much more. We also work on the public procurement framework, for instance, in terms of having non-price criteria. I think this is particularly important for pushing the circular economy, clean tech companies, that we also allow their kind of a reward for the green premium in a way. And traditionally, public procurement has been quite focused on quality price selection. So, but we also try to bring in made in Europe requirement, which is important for resilience, but also to bring in green criteria, etc., that can be stressed in public procurement. So there is, this was particularly highlighted already in the Clean Industrial Deal, but also will be highlighted here. There will be a lot of things trying to be made easier for companies. For instance, the 28th regime, sort of that one can register as a company that then applies to all member states. Next slide. So here, I want to give, for instance, the example of the digital product passport. Here, I think we try to address particularly the fragmented rules for packaging, labeling, and waste. And the digital product passport, this is something that will be now rolled out progressively. It will basically be sort of a digital container, a quick response code on the product that will then thereby eliminate certain obligations for company to provide conformity, paper-based documentation that can then be accessed instead via a quick response code, etc. So there are also a lot of burdens on companies with regards to repackaging, etc. So this digital product passports will hopefully make life much easier. We will have the first application for the area of batteries, actually will come in 2026. And then it will be rolled out much more. This is basically already introduced via the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation. And it will be then operational for batteries in 2027 and applies to many others. So I think this is something that should be on the radar also of cluster managers to inform companies about that this is coming and that they can be sort of ready when this hits also other areas. because there will be also the revision of the new legislative framework, NLF, that will also look in this. So that will deal basically with a rollout. But we also have basically, as part of the Circular Economy Act that will come in the fourth quarter next year, we'll also address some of the reform, for instance, of end of waste aspects, etc. So it's all about trying to look that we can reduce the burden on companies, particularly with regards to secondary market and requirements that companies need to fulfill to document, etc. So this is a bit the zoom out, the doubling down on the key barriers, which I think here are perhaps the most relevant. Next slide, please. With regards to services, I think one key thing that might be of particular interest is a recognition of professional qualifications. So of many workers or companies that want to employ a key worker from a different member states, they need to go through the authorities, and the member states come with a lot of paper documents to prove that they have the qualification so that it's recognized. And they're actually, at the moment, it's only in 7 member states that have an automatic recognition process. So there's a lot more to be done. And this is something I think that would make the life not only of our citizens who want to work in another member state, but also of the companies who want to employ key staff, I think will make their life much easier. So this is something that a lot of work is going on, in particular to digitalize the processes. And that is very important. And perhaps many of you know also the burdensome rules for the posting of workers. They're particular, for instance, if you're a company that provides repair services in another member states, you only have to send the worker there for 3 days or something, and not the whole year. So it's a temporary work. But you need to carry out a lot of documents to prove social security coverage, etc. So there is now efforts to make a digital platform so that this not has to be carried around. And this is still in the process of co-legislation, so where member states still have to agree on, and some were reluctant, but there's now a new momentum to change this. So, and we're hopeful that this finally gets also moved in a way to make the life of our businesses easy. Next slide, please. So, and there I flagged that the second, I think, key pillar is boosting basically the dynamism of the single market for services. And here I would like to flag, because it was mentioned as a particular interest today, for instance, the Construction Services Act. I mean, while the sector provides 11% of GDP, actually there are only 1% of construction services that trade cross-border. I mean, that shows also the potential there. And there are a lot of requirements with regards to health and safety, energy efficiency criteria, and or, for instance, to provide liability insurance for cross-border services. So there is a lot that can be done in this area. And their Construction Services Act will be presented next year. So the real change here in the address to services is, so far it has been tried to be addressed very much in a horizontal way. And there will be now a new focus also on a sectoral approach to, in a way, particular zoom also in the areas of energy, transport, telecommunication, and financial services. Sorry, I saw my video was dropped, so you have me back. Next slide, please. Of course, very important for our cluster organizations are SMEs. So there's a much more focus also on SMEs, and you covered the simplification area. I think the key issue was there that we had the proposal for a definition for small mid-caps, so 250 until 749 employees, which basically means when a company outgrows a bit the current SME definition and goes over the 249 limit, that normally means that they're also out of a number of exceptions where they don't have to provide reporting obligations, etc. So the idea here is also to see that we can also exempt in a number of areas, also the small mid caps in this. And I think this is something very important here. We will continue to work with the SME Envoy network, also to work on the burden restriction. So that SME focus was also very clearly stressed as part of the single market strategy. Next slide, please. And digitalization. I mean, I mentioned already the digital product passport. I think that is the key area. But there will also be an introduction, for instance, of a business wallet for the helping companies to identify themselves that they have basically fulfilled the SME criteria instead of, again, providing documentation to every member state. There will also be e-invoicing and other areas. I mean, when you look at the communication, you have, for each area, you have sort of a bit an action box where you can find a little bit more. Next slide, please. And there I'm coming to my last one. And this is more or less to stress that we will only make progress together with the member states and also with our stakeholders in raising, again, the importance to take actions. And there is, in a way, in the single market strategy, also a little warning that the Commission may propose a Single Market Barriers Prevention Act in 2027 if it deems necessary. And I mean, that is sort of, in a way, the signal that if we don't progress together with the member states, then we have to take also legislative actions to really help our businesses. But let's see first how we progress, and we will report on the progress, and we will basically collaborate with member states via the SMEs meeting. There was an annual high political meeting announced, a single market Sherpas meeting. So there is now a real effort to bring this also higher at the political level. So the Sherpas, for instance, are supposed to be orientated as part of the president's office or prime minister's office. So to make sure that this is not delegated down, but that is a high political priority. And then we will also report with the annual single market enforcement agenda and then take stock in the implementation. And with this, I think I had more text on the slides, but I tried to also stick a bit to the timeline. I gave you a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you so much on behalf of all of us listening to that very interesting set of slides and presentation. Thank you so much for that. Of course, all the slides, if you're okay with it, will all be available to everybody through the platform hereafter. But also, I think if you can stay with us a bit during the panel, some of the panelists may have issues that we might want to bring back to you. Can I just ask one question before we go to the Slido questions? But one question to you. I was very struck by what you were saying about the lack of services trade within the European Union relative to services trade outside the European Union. So in terms of the overall economic potential, is the Commission's view that this new focus on services opens up a whole new economic potential for increasing services activity within Europe?
Absolutely. I mean, we have, however, also a difficult landscape. I mean, you have sometimes vested interests, and in some member states, there's not always immediately the willingness to open up the markets because just of the different particularities, the history of the services. But I think if we really work on it and create a true, or let's say nearly true, single market for services, I think there's a huge potential. Yeah. And of course, I mean, we need to be aware that, of course, in the digital field, let's say, we have lost, of course, ground vis-a-vis the US, for instance. If you look there at the huge corporations that master of Europe. But if you also look at the issue of economic security, of strategic dependencies, we, I think, need to also unlock the potential that we have in Europe. And I see, for instance, a lot of scope also in making much more data available, also for industry, etc., and the services that are related to this. So I think there's a lot of scope, and hopefully this new communication and the new zoom in on this area will hopefully get dynamism to the work on these areas.
Thank you very much. We will come back to you, if I may, after we've taken an opportunity to hear from our participants, all of those joining us in the webinar today. We've got 2 Slido questions. These are not multiple choice questions. These are opportunities for you to tell us what is your view in your words. So the first is to focus on which aspect of the single market strategy about which we've just been hearing do you consider is most relevant for your organization? Now, I will lead the witness slightly by saying, so such things as procurement, potential through procurement, through digitalisation, through product standards, through the use of EU funding. So do please take an opportunity just to put into our Slido, and I will create a word cloud, as it were, from the responses that we receive. So there was a particular focus on the opportunities that Carsten was talking about in relation to things like mutual recognition of qualifications, overcoming the difficulties for posting of workers. There was a sector focus, and you might want to say what is most relevant for your organisation is one of those sectors. So whether it was, for example, the Construction Services Act or others. There was a focus on SMEs and on mid-caps. Is that something which is important from your organisations, from your cluster's point of view? And the relationship between the SME strategy and the sector strategies and how that might work. So just literally, if our participants would be kind enough just to put up in as few words as possible what is most relevant for your organisation, for your cluster. So we've got innovation and scaling up, digitalisation. Yes, the Construction Services Act was referenced. That's quite important. The relevance of dealing with European Union rules. What about the ownership of SME strategy on the part of member states and of alignment of rules? Yeah, focus on SME. We're getting that through strongly now. Yeah, this is a very helpful word cloud now. Thank you very much to all of our participants for joining in and putting forward their suggestions. Knowledge sharing, standardization, digitalization, business opportunities. Yes, that's always a very big issue for clusters, finding those opportunities and making them available to your members. Okay, let me thank you very much for the responses on that. And now let's turn, and there may indeed be some complementarity between the responses to these 2 questions. Let's create a word cloud about what are the biggest challenges for enhancing SME competitiveness. So let's think widely here. This will clearly be something which is about issues in the further completion of the single market, and Carsten has given us a really excellent presentation about what those are. I think I'm suggesting that SME competitiveness, as indeed we've discussed previously, I know when we were discussing these issues with Enrico Lette on a much earlier stage, but as Carsten was saying, this is not a fire and forget operation from the European Commission. This is an ongoing and high-level process, bringing the Sherpa system and the SME envoys close into the system. So let's see what are the issues that would impact on SME competitiveness. So the complexity of rules, absolutely. Trying to deal with the level of red tape, which is both presumably through EU legislation and national legislation, and sometimes the divergence or the differences between countries in terms of that regulation. Taxes, of course, seeing the legal framework, and that was interesting what Carsten had to say about the forthcoming further reforms in relation to legal establishment in other countries across Europe. There is a financing issue, of course, and we didn't talk about it in the SME strategy, but there will be issues about the potential for SMEs to benefit from greater integration of a capital market in Europe. Even if we cannot completely yet achieve a single capital market, we may be able to make reforms which would be of importance in small and medium enterprise funding and access to funding at that level rather than large capital sums. So let's have a look. We've got yes, in SME competitiveness, we need to tackle local regulations. We need to tackle different rules and culture. We need to deal with the legal framework and where those divergences occur, and the red tape, the level of red tape that we encounter. Thank you very much for those challenges. I know Carsten and his colleagues are always extremely grateful for the feedback that we get through the cluster talks and indeed through the cluster collaboration platform. Thank you for that. Let me turn, if I may, now after our Slido to the panel. Noting, of course, that we've got Carsten still with us, I do want to ask our panelists each, however, first to introduce themselves and indeed respond to the debate, to the issues for the debate and for the presentation from Carsten. Could I start, please, with Anna Rosenqvist, who is the Chief Executive at Interior Cluster in Sweden. I wonder if you could perhaps tell us something about your cluster, Anna, but also maybe respond to where you see some of those greater opportunities. What are some of the key aspects that you, listening to Carsten, you said, yeah, that would help, that would make a difference?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Yeah, it was very interesting to listening to this. And as you said, I'm running the Swedish furniture cluster, which is situated in the south part of Sweden. We have about 100 companies in the manufacturing, well-known international brands. And our regional, area of excellence has actually become green and digital transition. And we are very much at the moment focusing on the upcoming digital product passports coming from the eco design regulation. And I got the question to join a project already 2021, a Nordic Interreg project. And the question for that project was, is blockchain the methodology to create digital product passports? I have to tell you now that I'm from the furniture business. I know nothing about blockchain technology, methods or technology, So I was a little bit scared because for me, that's cryptocurrency and that's dangerous. It tells more about me than blockchain. But by participating in this together with Norway and Denmark and Finland, I realized that this is much more than talking about the blockchain. After that, I started a national project because I contacted my tech friends, in the tech industry. I said, do you know anything about this, about digital product passports and blockchain? And they said no. So and I said, is there a business potential for you to join me to understand better? Because I realized I know how to produce furniture. I know nothing about how to digitalize the furniture industry when it comes to information architecture. And since he from Sigma Technology said no, we contacted the professor in informatics in the Linnaeus University where we live. And he said, I know nothing about it, but professor does a quick desktop research. And then he realized that there is no research regarding this, and especially not in the furniture industry. That's how we started the collaboration. We've done a Nordic project, and we have used one chair called Frankie. We pulled the information regarding all information regarding the chair. And we put that into Sigma's test bed, and they created a digital product passport created manually. Fine. Now we have funding for the second national project. So now we want to see if we can do the same thing again, but on another company using the same information structure. And that's what we're doing right now. And it worked. So we are happy so far. Next step now is to see how can we bring on the sub-suppliers or more or less the whole value chain, because that's when we do really make sure that each sub-supplier own their own data. Remember now, I'm from furniture. It's scary. I don't want to give all my information away. Who owns the data? So this is where we have a cultural clash by the green and digital transition, which is just wonderful to work with. Now I can go on forever, so you have to stop me. There's one more thing I want to mention is that we've actually realized now that we've gathered information and we'd love to share this with others. So we want to go for a European consortium and bring our experience and knowledge to the bigger picture, to the rest of the countries, and we will have a sharing event in Sweden, September 18th, where all of you who would like to come and learn more, you are so welcome. I will stop there, Andrew.
Yeah, well, we doubtless will come back to you, but thank you very much for that. And of course, what you were saying about working with others and collaborating is absolutely about how clusters operate, and that's very much in the both in your own locality and the opportunities for collaboration across a much wider geography using clusters. So that's great.
And I just want to mention there that the companies, the member companies, they realize that they don't have the capacity or knowledge to take on and be prepared for this.
Yeah, that's often where cluster management is really effective, is finding solutions to some of these common problems so that all of the companies can focus on what they do best, which is innovation and production to high quality. That's the key, isn't it? Let me turn, if I may, to Catalan Robert Podaru, who is Chief Executive at the Leviathan Group, which I understand is a construction group. Catalan, if you would, I can see your slide, but I can't see you.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
We really would love to see you.
Yeah, sorry for that. Hold on. Yeah, I think I have a problem with my,
Yes, we're getting the background, but not you. Super, there you are. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us.
Hello.
Do please, likewise, tell us a bit about your group and the cluster, but also perhaps tell us a bit about the response to the Construction Services Act prospect.
Yes, so our group actually, in our group we have an architecture engineer company, also a general construction company, and also a research and development company that's doing automation and digitalization for the group. So we are part of the cluster tech, which brings together in Romania the architecture and engineering, the construction company, the biggest construction company, and also suppliers. What I can say about the dynamic of the market in construction in Romania, but also in the cluster, is that also the cluster has a few years. The companies in Romania are actually very eager to adopt digitalization and actually very keen on that. We have few or many companies now in Romania that have also this R&D. We have like 40 programmers in our group. And also they approach implementing BIM, digitalization, and also this holistic approach on digital twins and AI information. Why is that? Because maybe Romania got into digitalization a bit later, but we have the advantage in having all these mature tools that can facilitate the data processing and the agility on way we have to move. Also, you know that Romania is an emerging market. We had in the past year a big economic growth, especially in the construction domain. Our domain was contributing over 8% in the GDP. Why I'm seeing this important, especially on a market, because all this digitalization, all these new technologies actually allows us to design and build greener building faster, because we actually all of this is data processing. But we see now an issue that by comparing to the US, all these investments somehow reduce our capability to the national market, because going, especially with the services and the construction, it's hard to go abroad. Actually, we are thinking how to do that. And of course, we know that in the end, the national standard in construction will not change. That's why we think that approaching this digitalization of data processing with AI and gathering data, we can adapt to local standards. But we find it challenging to assess the European market, because if we are speaking about being competitive, uh, we see that US market has so much more capital in any domain. So in order to become competitive on a grander scale, you have to have the possibility to fast accessing a bigger market, as the US companies already have. So I think now we have the solution. We can adapt to different standards, but for sure, this red taping and complexity of EU regulation self-contain us especially in construction, on more national ground. So I truly believe that this single master approach, buying together with all the technological tools, will allow us as companies, especially we are a large group of companies, but um, we understand the challenge of smaller companies and medium companies. In order to develop, you need to pour a lot of funding and investing in research, development, implementing all of this, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. But in order to do that, you need to know that you have a bigger market than
absolutely. That's an extremely important point. Can I just ask, because I think Carsten, one of the things he was saying was about what are relatively small. I think the figures, if I remember, were 11% and 1%. He'll correct me if I was wrong.
Yes, you're right.
Of activity within member states as compared to across the European Union as a whole. You were talking about small businesses, of course. Very often for SMEs, the critical thing is for the, as it were, the prime contractor, the lead contractor, the larger company, to be opening up these markets, and then they go in as part of the subcontractor operations, so they can benefit from the ways in which large companies are accessing the large market that you're describing. Do the Construction Services Act, is that does that have the scope that you're looking for in relation to things like the divergences and differences in building regulations between member states?
Yeah, I think it does. Maybe not so much in changing the specific standards, because if you speak about engineering and some national technical standards, I think that will be harder to change, and I think that will be easily to overcome with the AI processes adoption, because we are doing now and see that once you have set up your internal rules, you can change the data set and then you can go to other markets.
Yeah.
But in respect to EU regulation and different requirements in public procurement, we see that this construction act might harmonize and mitigate the difference, because if I want to go, I don't know, to another country, to France, to bid, I understand I have to adapt to the technical standards, and that will be easier. But in order to go there, I'll see a lot of certification and requirements needed that will be sometime impossible to get in time in order to participate in that tender. And we see that also here in Romania, company coming from abroad, there are certain certification authorization needed, which means a lot of paperwork to prove actually the same technical capability, but it differs. And when you speak about public tender, especially in Romania, we have very short term of public tender, and we've seen that, and we had to adapt to that. But the same for foreign companies come to Romania. Sometimes we have partners from different countries. It's very hard to prove the certification on certain type of buildings, certain capabilities of personnel of engineering that match the Romanian regulation. I'm certain that is the same if we want to go outside. So I think disharmonization of rules and maybe simplifying, and this digital passport that will be unified on a European level, together with all these new technologies, can actually provide for European countries a broader market where we can develop and be competitive with the US market and Asian market, because we've seen that although Europe is a great, as a GDP, it's a very important actor, the companies cannot reach the level of US companies or Asian companies. And we see a lot of, for example, we see a lot of companies from US that, for example, in design, that they have so billions in revenue from services. We think, how can we match that? But they are working all around Europe. They are working all around the globe. And they develop themselves in US first, and they get the power and the capital and the knowledge to expand. But for us in Europe, it's quite challenging because we don't have a bigger market, and especially in construction, most of the time is reduces to the national market.
Kevin, thank you very much. That was, I mean, I think not least the point you made at the end there is absolutely capturing the relative importance of the single market, creating that internal market which can deliver the level of competitiveness that is necessary globally now. So that was a very good point, well made. Thank you. Let me turn, if I may, to Frederick Laux, who is Managing Director at Flux 50. Frederick, could you likewise please tell us something about Flux 50 and your cluster activity, but also perhaps relate it to some of the things that Carsten was telling us about and some of the opportunities that may lie in the single market strategy for you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So I'm Frederick Laux. I'm responsible for Flux 50. Flux 50 is the Flemish/Belgium cluster on energy. So we are linking SMEs together with knowledge centers and public authorities in trying to realize that strange thing called energy transition. So decarbonisation, defossilization of our energy supply, so as well electricity as molecules. And at this moment, the buzzword in our sector is actually flexibility, flexibility in generation. Just as an example, we are blessed today and yesterday with a lot of sun and a little bit of heat, meaning that prices are very low because actually everybody thinks the prices are very low because actually we have a lot of solar energy. But in practice, we have seen that yesterday at 5-6 o'clock, that actually the energy, the electricity price has never been as high as at that price at that time in our region, due to the fact that all aircos were working very, very hard and the sun was going down. So we need actually to have demand and production being put in line with each other. And that's what we call flexibility. And that flexibility is a very new phenomenon and needs a lot of data. And yeah, something that we have learned already is that when it comes to new things and standardization, legislation, that kind of stuff, then things are not in line with each other. So on one hand, technology is progressing very fast, and on the other hand, you have the legislation and all the standards that are lagging. So just as an example, last year I was on a conference on the topic of flexibility, and one of the things was having pitches from companies, and the three, let's say, best per pitching companies actually all had the same kind of product, but for a different region. So we had, in fact, three regional champions, which was very difficult to decide which one was now the best, but yeah, they were not able to internationalize because the rules were quite different in all the different member states. So when we actually focus as a cluster on innovation, we realized very fast that actually when we try to introduce that innovative products into the market, that legislation and market design provide a major blocking introductory phase for a lot of the technology that we develop within the region, within Belgium, because Belgium is quite complex with different regions and different rules. But certainly when we then try to export, and yeah, as Belgium is quite a small country, for us export is crucial. And what we see there is that the energy networks are physically connected through high voltage lines and pipelines and I don't know whatever. And yeah, the Russian situation has learned that it's quite, let's say, also they're quite fragile. But when it comes to legislation and it comes to all that other nice things, then actually Europe is not yet connected, and there are there's a lot of red tape when we're trying to export. And for us, that export is crucial. And I want there to come back to something that has been presented earlier on. At this moment, only last week, there was a huge debate on public procurement and especially cross-border public procurement. Because what we actually see is when you make a comparison between the public procurement of different member states, you can see that very large markets for us, like France, like Germany, Italy, are well below 2% of their total public procurement that is in cross-border atmosphere. So that's very, very low. While, for example, in Belgium, we are at 10% because we're quite an open economy. But we see that even if Europe is open and all the intentions of the European Commission are very good, I do see that that one of the terrible things, as it was mentioned, is also that the member states are not always following in that willingness of the member states to go abroad and to have that public procurement and to open up their markets is fairly low due to some local aspects that we see, especially in let's say quite critical market as energy.
And Frederick, that the public procurement, your experience, is it that there are rules that are making it more difficult, or is it actually that on the face of it, the procurement is available and is open across Europe, but that doesn't mean that those who are the decision makers in the procurement process are not applying their own, as it were, prejudices or informal rules or going to the suppliers that they've always had, who of course are more likely to be their own national suppliers?
Well, when you do a request for proposals, when you go into public procurement, everybody follows the European rules. That's for sure, because otherwise you can go to court quite fast. But what you see in practice is that, for example, when you open up your public procurement in, let's say, Danish, to just take a language, not to take one of the larger ones, well, then there is a burden for an SME because they need to respond in Danish. They need to know what the particularities are in Danish language. So you see that in general, you can see that a lot of the public procurement is on very, very different aspects. And so language is just one of the languages. Also legislation, standardization is trying to really defend the own market still.
Frederick, thank you very much. That's very interesting. If I may turn, last but not least, to Tadas Kubilius, who is Chief Executive at Smart Energy. Tadas, you're based in Lithuania. Can you tell us something about Smart Energy and your work and your cluster's work, but also, again, following in Frederick's footsteps, as it were, about how the energy sector might see opportunities in relation to improving the working of the single market?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for being here as well. It's a pleasure to share ideas and what we do here in Lithuania as well. Following Frederick's ideas, I would also emphasize something that is a quite positive aspect as well, that all the single market here is basically working on focus on consumer choice and consumers protection here. So, I mean, the flexibility in energy source for every consumer is a very specific and very unique part in life. When we're talking about public sector and we're talking about private sector as well, what we do as Smart Energy, the Digital Innovation Hub, we're trying to focus on solutions for both private and public sectors, and the consumers can win when they can choose, when they have a choice of energy source, when they have a choice of technological solution or software solution. So this is what we do at the moment as well. What I would like to emphasize as well, that the renewable energy sources, differently from what Frederick was mentioning, that the price was quite high when the sun is shining. So in Lithuania on Sunday we had negative prices. So we had a chance to clean up our clothes and use microwaves very cheap, basically for nothing. So this is kind of a choice what we have at the moment. This is the direction that we're working on. So what we do as well from the energy aspect, what is quite a unique project at the moment, that we connecting prosumers from public and private sectors into one distant power generation use. So this is a unique project what we do, because we can independently from energy providers give electricity on a contract based basically on 20 years for a lower price without profits for energy providers. So this is kind of a prosumers, let's say a bigger prosumers electric generation power plant, hybrid power plant, solar, wind, and battery storage as well. So a unique opportunity for prosumers. And I would say that this is also a choice, not only for a source of electricity, but the choice of what type of electricity and at what price may come. So this is a part of a single market, let's say, result, where we're also implementing digital tools efficiently to use efficiently within one power plant electricity provision and monitoring to every prosumer, so they know how many kilowatt hours they need to use on their peak time, or how much power they need to use on their let's say public transportation and so forth and so on. So this is what we can monitor and use. Then we can scale it to other places as well. Yeah.
Just forgive me, time is against us, but I'd be very interested if perhaps tell us a little bit about the extent to which there is a single energy market, if not across the whole of Europe, certainly crossing borders in Europe, because clearly there is energy supply across Europe and across borders, but the balancing of the supply and demand and the creation of a market, and by extension therefore the pricing, is going to presumably still be effectively done on a national basis, on national grids.
Yeah, sure. It's a spot on question, I would say. Yeah, the links between countries. Let's say in our case, we're building a link between the western part of Europe and Lithuania. I mean, we had a historically good grid within the country, but not so good connection to the Western world. So this is kind of of course, regulatory complexity. And when we talk about a whole European market and exports to other, of course, the liberalization of the national regulatory and liberalization of markets within the countries, this is kind of a challenging, I would say, but it can be done with the tools that we have at the moment. We have a strategy that was presented as well. So yeah, we're moving on the right direction, I would say, which is first.
Thank you very much. I can see Frederick has his hand raised. Frederick, come in, please.
Yes, because it's something that we do have already a single Western electricity market. So the real electricity price is determined, is the same in Germany, Flanders, Belgium, north of France, Netherlands, but then the taxation which comes on top of it is very different. And then you have the legislation. If I can build on what was said by Tadas, we have tried to create what we call a virtual business area, where we say that all flexibility within a business area is being treated somewhat different than the energy flows outside the business area. And we asked a regulatory sandbox for that to the Flemish government. And in the end, it was turned down because it would have been against European legislation, according to what the regulator told us. What we see happening now is actually that in the Netherlands, because they do have a congestion problem there, that they are actually really doing what we were suggesting, while I think that Netherlands is in the same European Union as where Belgium is part of. So from time to time, regulators and legislators are also using Europe as being the nasty boy in order to disallow things that for market reasons they don't want to see proceed. But
Thank you very much. Carsten, I'd love to bring you back in, please. And also perhaps if you were able just to respond to one or two of the points that have been made, but also I think there's quite a strong sense of the importance of the digital product passport and the digitization program, that it is a way of overcoming many of the existing problems if we can shift into a more digital format.
Absolutely. I mean, on digitalization, I mean, that is a key push as part of the simplification agenda. But I think we also need to be frank there. I think a real shift will only happen once we make much more better use of the data that we have. I know in some of the smaller countries, you already have the possibility that data are pre-filled for the companies. They just have to approve and not have to fill it in themselves. And I think this is something, there's an increasing awareness that we need to make those data available and help our businesses instead of asking them, and maybe use sometimes satellite-based data that we have. So there are a lot of work actually going to explore how we can make the life easier, but it's not always easy, but there's quite a bit of work to be done. I mean, just a few points. So Frederick mentioned regulatory sandboxes. So normally, I mean, the purpose of a regulatory sandbox is, of course, to explore something in a safe environment. So therefore, it could be against the current rule to test something. But I don't know the specifics of that case. But normally, also the Commission sometimes proposes regulatory sandboxes to test particular things. So and in a safe environment, that must not be immediately fitting for the context, but I don't know the purpose in this respect. But to both on the energy points, I want to also flag, I mean, we have made in Europe quite a lot of progress with regards to renewables. So, I mean, we're on a high in terms of having reached 1/4 of our energy consumption of renewables. But indeed, where we lag is in terms of electrification. So there we have been really flat. And there, if we want to create a more European markets, I think there a lot needs to be done. So we have published an action plan on affordable energy, particularly important for our energy-intensive industries, for instance. But also there is a forthcoming European grid package. And I think that tries to address that issue, because indeed, if we don't invest in our grids, we can build up as much solar energy, but if we can not bring it around, we will not all benefit from it. So I think that is very important. On the issue of standards, indeed, I think just to highlight that this was also one of the terrible tenets. And indeed, there are sometimes long delays in bringing new harmonized standards on the board. And that's why we're also doing a review of the standards regulation in Q2, I think, next year. So to deal with the long delays. And I think that is indeed a very important area. I think the more we have harmonized standards, the more we can be the first movers, the more we can benefit also of our single market. So I think that is a key issue. And I want to just recall the terrible 10, these were not only here are the EU officials, but it was based basically on the feedback that we received on public consultation, on the contributions, etc. So a lot of work went actually down to say, okay, what are those where the highest problems we face? And that is the outcome there. And with regards to the Construction Services Act, I mean, this is still to come. But here, the key focus is on really lowering the barriers to cross-border market access. I mean, that will be the focus as it will be announced. but colleagues are now working on this to prepare.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I know you have to be away and we have to conclude shortly, but thank you very much indeed for all of those responses to the discussion. I just want, before we close the panel discussion, I want to go back to Anna, if I may. We've been in discussion about energy and other industries and other sectors, but looking across, not particular to your sector, but thinking about how businesses are working across Europe. This issue, there are two things I wonder if you would like to comment on. One is is there a difficulty on posting workers to the, and do we need to deal with that? And Carsten was quite clear this was continues to be a significant problem. And secondly, is there a great opportunity where product standards are concerned? Because the European Union is capable of creating what are effectively international standards. So if we can have European standards that work effectively in the single market, that would be a very powerful instrument for accessing international markets as well.
If I start with the standards, yes, we need to have the same everywhere, because I think that when the digital product passport is here, we need to be able to understand the information in the same way. It needs to be structured in the same way, and then the standardization work is ongoing. I know, because I meet some of the people, the Swedish partners in that, but I don't really know where we are on the European level. But in the past, in the furniture industry, France has had their standards, Sweden has had their, Canada has had their. That means that it's difficult to trade. And then we have to also remember that from a Swedish perspective, more than 60% of the furniture produced in Sweden are exported to other countries. Of course, mainly within the European Union, but then also outside. So yes, standards needs to be, especially now when it comes to how to structure the information in the digital product passport, because it's not just about the information carrier, the tech solution. That's the smallest problem, I would say. It's more to how to structure the information. What are the standards? So yes, that needs to be. And posting people, it's always, finding people to work in the industry it's difficult. So I say yes to both questions.
Okay, Anna, thank you so much, and thank you to you, and indeed to Katalin, to Frederick, and to Tadas. Thank you all for being such excellent panelists and giving us such useful perspectives on your particular clusters and sectors. Thank you very much indeed. And in particular, thank you to Carsten for such an excellent presentation in response to some of the. But we never close without first having had an opportunity also to hear again from Nina about funding opportunities, so that clusters are across some of the funding potential. Nina, could you take us through?
Many thanks, and also to all the speakers, very interesting points that you've made. Just to highlight, closing this webinar, a few calls that might be of interest to you. First of all, it's a call called Supporting the Clean Energy Transition of European Industry and Businesses. This call aims to accelerate the decarbonisation of industry by closing the gap between the supply and demand of net zero energy technologies, and of course fostering collaboration. There are two focus areas that you can see here in the screen. First of all, to facilitate collaboration between industrial sectors and technology providers, to deploy standardized and sustainable energy solutions tailored to sectorial needs, and the other one to promote energy cooperation among companies in physical proximity. So, for example, in the industrial parks or within the clusters. The deadline is the 23rd of September. You have the topic ID in the screen and the link in the chat. There's a call open to enhance the national cooperation centers and strengthening the European cybersecurity ecosystem, since cybersecurity is also a very big issue at the moment, to help accelerate the uptake of cutting-edge cybersecurity solutions. As you can see here, there are many possible actions. Of course, with regards to accelerators, incubators, platforms, but also to promote access to market and access to finance for EU cybersecurity solutions, doing events for matchmaking, community building, and also to promote best practices and cross-border cooperation. The deadline is the 7th of October. Topic ID here in the presentation that we will share, and the link in the chat. And last but not least, the uptake of acceleration services. The objective is to accelerate the market uptake of EU-funded security research by specialized services and advisory support to SME, startup, and security practitioners. So we're looking at innovative solutions in the security ecosystem to get a self-sustained service mechanism acting as market catalyst, and strong collaboration between research, SMEs, and security practitioners, improving technology transfer and market access of new solutions. The deadline is the 12th of November, Horizon call with the topic ID here and the link in the chat. That's all from my side, and many thanks to all of you.
Nina, thank you very much. And thanks once again to all of our presenters. Thank you to all of our participants, not least for joining in on the Slido and giving us your feedback. That's really helpful. Just to remind you that the presentations are all available through the platform, and do please continue the discussion through the European Cluster Collaboration Platform and the general discussion group there. We are, from Cluster Talks, is now going to be on a summer break. It wouldn't be any surprise to us across Europe to realise that summer is here. It's the sun has really reached us fast and hard. So we will be back on the 10th of September. So please look out through the ECCP, look out for the cluster talks in the autumn. Do please remember both the opportunities to maintain the discussion, but also do please remember all of those fascinating events that are taking place that were presented earlier in our discussion today about the events both across Europe and indeed the opportunities for business to go to other parts of the world. Thank you all very much indeed for being with us this morning. Do have a good day. Keep safe in the sunshine. We're very happy to have had you with us this morning. Thank you once again for being here today.